This week on the Roll for Crit podcast, we're talking about the Boston Festival of Indie Games, plus we got a couple of new game announcements and more.
And our topic of the week, rules. What makes a good rule book, and how do you explain those rules to your friends who just can't understand the rules, which are so simple to you? I'm Will Keeler.
I'm Jonathan Estes, and this is the Roll for Crit podcast.
So, let's start off with the Boston Festival of Indie Games. Now, this is a festival that will be held on September 13th in MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Bunch of smarties.
Now, this is a game that celebrates indie, both video games and board games. And this year, they've received over 200 submissions for their featured games and stuff, which is quite impressive and really exciting.
Because they have these are new design games that people bring to show off.
Correct.
Which is pretty cool.
And so, all submissions for, showcases are already full, which is really cool. But, I mean, if you're still interested, they still have exhibition tables to go. And obviously, if you want to just go and, view everything, there are tickets available.
And they have games you can play, right?
Yes.
Like you can just hang out and
No touching.
Yeah. No. It sounds cool, though.
Yeah.
We both have people in Boston.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll stop by.
We know people.
We know people. It's always good to have more game conventions and stuff like that. Moving on, we got some game announcements. One game that won't be at the Boston Festival of Indie Games, because it's not an indie game.
Far from it,
is the Archer board game, based on the TV show, which is on FX. And this is from Cryptozoic, who do a ton of licensed board games, coming out very soon, this month. Or next month, depends on when you watch this, could be last month, I don't know. And they put out some details on how the game plays. So if you're familiar with Archer, the TV show, it's about a group of secret agents, sort of. Well, they're spies, but it's a comedy. And in the game, you get to play as one of the main characters. They have all of them, basically pretty much all the central ones, and each character gets their own specific deck. So you have cards tailored to the personality of that character. And you sort of go throughout the headquarters of ISIS.
Disclaimer first. They are not related anyway to the terrorist group ISIS. They actually got that name first, I'm pretty sure, unless...
Probably. Well, I guess technically in Egypt and all that stuff. I don't know.
Hopefully, they're actually going to address that in the next season. I mean, I really hope so.
That would be amusing.
Yes.
But anyway, the goal is to basically show up your coworkers, go on missions, and it sounds very in the theme of the show where you actually you might want to insult somebody, so you roll to see if you can come up with a good insult for them, stuff like that. It's hard to say. I don't know how fun it will be. It's from just reading about it. We'll have to try it out. But it sounds at least that they are. It feels like they got the heart of the show down, which is cool. We both like that show.
Great show.
Check it out.
Another new game. Well, not a new game, but an expansion for a new game. Space Cadets is releasing their new expansion, which is Space Cadets Resistance is mostly futile. New expansion with some new missions, as well as allows to a 2-player apparently. It's according to the picture on the box.
Because the original is only at least 3.
3,
right?
Yes. And apparently each station now has a new item called the Psychoacoustic Neural Interface Control, also known as Panic.
Good job getting that out there in one go.
This apparently is to help stations if they're having some issues and things aren't going as well. However, there are consequences.
Ooh, consequences.
Consequences.
Are you going to go into detail on that?
No, we do not know actually the consequences.
Okay,
that's why I did it mysteriously, because we do not know what the consequences are. Maybe you have to get up and do jumping jacks. Who knows? That'd actually be really funny.
Yeah, but that game is pretty fun. The only thing I can think is with an whole extra set of rules for another player to take, it might take even longer to explain.
Well, we'll see what they have, but it seems like besides the button there isn't too much, and that shouldn't be too bad because it's not each station has a new rule. I think they added a couple components to make other stations fair, but I don't know whether they're new rules. But we'll talk more about that later.
We will. We'll see. Also, this last week, NPR, National Public Radio, put out an audio story. You can listen to it on our site, and the link's below, called Move Over Video Games board games, something, are back in town. Clearly, I know all about it. But basically, it was pretty much a story introducing people to board games. They talked a lot about a place called Brooklyn Game Lab in New York, where it's like a game store and people come and play and design games and stuff like that.
We should visit.
We should check it out. And talking about how the reporter was discovering this world of board games and how turns out her and her boyfriend now can play board games together.
I find it a little funny discovering, because I feel like discovering is like no one's been there before.
Right.
She's not discovering it really. She's more. It's being shown.
She's like Christopher Columbusing it.
Yeah, she's Christopher Columbusing it.
But no, that's the thing, because I know I read some. I don't want to say complaints, but sort of people being, the tone of it was very introductory and very, look, you guys, not all people who play board games aren't just smelly nerds, and almost a little borderline patronizing. I don't think that was the intent. I mean, the tone was very friendly, but it is, I guess it's for people in the hobby and the industry. You get to a point where you sort of feel like, aren't we past this? Can we start talking about?
I mean, once again, it's one of those things. Stereotypes are very hard to break out with a lot of people, especially if you're not on the popular side of whatever group may be. But
it's always good to have. I think it's cool to have the exposure.
No, I mean no. Any news is good news.
Absolutely.
For board games, at least. Unless you're the Transformers movie.
Unless you're the Transformers movie. Hope you didn't see that this weekend. Anyway, it's been a slow news week.
Yes.
That's all our news, but we do have a couple of Kickstarters that we wanted to throw your way.
I actually just backed this Kickstarter just 2 days ago.
Oh.
It's called Shadows of Arkham. In this game, it's a maxi micro game because their goal is to make sort of a micro game, small box, but because it had some Mara trash, they gotta have as many components as possible. And since it's also Cthulhu, that's even more.
Right. If you have a Cthulhu game, it's a mandate.
Yeah,
It must take up this much table space.
Yes. But it's a co-op game where you're working together to obviously, save Arkham. And they have this cool idea for a deck. There's a light side and shadow side, pretty much what's going on in Arkham. Light side, sort of what's going on in reality. Shadow is the other world, double-sided. But instead of the cards relating to the other side, they're directly other side, because then you can memorize and know what's coming up. Mm-hmm. You actually flip the deck over.
The whole deck?
The whole deck, so you go back and forth like that.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah, no, and so it's a fun co-op game, and for a kind of game you could take out to, like if you're going out to eat with friends and stuff, assuming one of your friends isn't a total slob.
Or going to someone's house, just throw in your bag or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is great. Yeah, I love games like that, like Love Letter or Resistance or Hanabi. You can just throw it somewhere. Mm-hmm. That sounds cool.
Yeah.
And you backed it, so it's got the official Roll for Crit seal of approval.
That doesn't mean much if it comes from me, though, because that's like every other game.
A couple ones that I just want to talk about. Full disclosure, I did not back them. but I thought they were big enough to be worth mentioning, and that's Through the Ages and Dungeon Lords. Both of them together because they're both from designer Vlada Flatil. His name. I had to look up the pronunciation and then I forgot it. But this is a huge name in board games. You've probably heard he'd done a couple that we're big fans of, like Space Alert and Mage Knight. Very popular board games. And these are actually sort of remastering of a couple of older games he's done that have either been out of print, or in the case of Dungeon Lords, it's an anniversary edition. So Through the Ages is a civilization building game. You sort of like the game Civilization on the computer. You start out, I sound like an old person, on the computer, you start out building your civilization, and you can go for technology or whatever war.
This one's different. It's a digital version of his old board game?
No, this is a physical reprint of the original game.
But aren't they also making a digital version?
Yes, they are also doing a digital version of it that's coming out in the future, so that's true. So you'll have that to look forward to as well. And Dungeon Lords is one where the players play as the masters of the dungeon, and you actually have sort of NPC cards come out as the heroes that you need to defend your dungeon against, which is a great idea. And this is the anniversary edition, so it comes with an expansion and all kinds of stuff.
And better components and things like that. So, I mean, definitely if you're a fan of, if you've already had the game, from what we can tell, it still seems like a good buy.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have the expansions yet. Plus, it comes in one box that fits everything, and
which is nice.
That's one thing we both love. If a game comes out with a bigger box just to fit it all in.
We'll get to storage soon, I think, as a topic too.
Yes.
But I think you can't go wrong. It's he's one of the most well-renowned designers, probably for a good reason.
Yeah, no, I mean every game that we can think of, even the ones we haven't played, are ones that we're dying to get a chance to play.
Yeah, and he does a lot of like very varied games. It's not like.
Like farming games.
Yeah, the guy did Agricola and then made Caverna, and it's like, yeah, a lot of different ones. Anyway, those are our Kickstarter pick starters.
Take a look. And now, I think it's time for the topic of the week.
All right, this week, as we said at the top of the show, we are talking about rules in board games. Specifically, I think two sections, and we're going to start out with the first one, which is what makes a good rule book for a board game. It often can be intimidating for new players and old alike when you get that new game and you really want to play and you open the box for the first time.
And half of it's filled with the rule book.
Yes, you take out an encyclopedia and you have to get through it. And oftentimes, 3/4 of it is not even in English. It makes it even harder. Or actually easier because you only need to read one section. Anyway, I was trying to think of, examples of what I think are like the best rule books in board games. And the first one that came to the top of my head that we just mentioned is Space Alert. And actually, I think Mage Knight does a very similar thing too, where it actually starts you off on tutorial missions, so it does not give you the full spectrum of rules in one go. You start off slow, very simple, and gradually it'll add, now use this component, and the next time you'll start with this, and then it gets a little harder and a little harder. And that's a great way, I think, to ease you into the process instead of being all at once bombardment of stuff that you're never going to remember, because that happens all the time.
Well, another thing I like, Eldritch Horror. Not Arkham Horror, especially Eldritch Horror. What they did is they actually have two rule books. The first one is actually the rules, and it explains how turn order goes, this. The second one is actually just an index, a glossary. So literally you can look up, I have no idea what to do in combat. Go to combat and it quickly lists the little things about combat, the items. And it's nice to have the little index.
And I know a few other games have that too, and that is really nice, especially because like once you know the rules, it's so much easier to just look in the reference book than have to look through like the teaching instructions to find something.
Because even if like a full rule book would be like combat rule page 43. Yes, I chose that number because they could.
Page 274.
Yeah. But it'd be like it takes you to the combat section. There's paragraphs and paragraphs. You have to read through this giant thing before you find maybe the one thing you need to find.
Yeah, and sometimes you're like you don't know which section it's in. It could be in either of these four, and you got to read through everything all at once.
However, what I think is the biggest thing is player companions. Because what that gives you,
reference sheets.
like little reference sheets. Because what that gives you is it gives everyone a little sheet where they can just quickly glance the rule and give them a sum of a turn in case they need to make sure about something. And I think it just makes the game go so much smoother.
No, I agree. That is one of the most important. Like anytime a game has that, it's like a relief.
Oh, no question. I mean, if your game has more than like 3 pieces.
No, I really think,
If your game has 3 decks. If you have 3 decks of cards, you need a reference sheet.
That's a sign. No, I think even like Catan could benefit from that.
Well, it actually does sort of.
Yeah, because
it gives you the building reference sheet.
Oh, that's true. It does have that. Yeah. But no, I think every game should have that. It's just so nice to be able to look because you never always want to be quite sure about what you're doing. Another thing, sort of like you were talking about the separate rule books, Formula D, the racing game, actually has one book that's the beginner rules and then one that's the advanced rules, sort of along the same lines of the tutorial missions, kind of. Although that's a game that I thought was weird because I didn't think the advanced rules were that much more complicated than the beginner rules, so that was kind of unnecessary. But I think bottom line, the rules need to be clear. Like one rule book that I hate is the one for ghost stories. Where I think like half the problem is it's just not translated very well. and there's typos, and some of the grammar is a little
Well, that's a big
weird,
issue when you bring a game from other
which a lot of games are. But most of them are pretty good.
Yeah, no.
But for some reason, this one there's like a couple sections in regards to how the like haunting ghosts move and stuff that every time we play, I get confused about exactly what you're supposed to do. And part of it is also, simply a matter of us playing the games. We have so many games that you tend to forget when it's been a while since you played one of them.
Well, that's why it's nice to have something that can be an easy, quick reference.
Exactly.
I think another thing that's definitely changing nowadays is the internet. Because there are a lot of times when there might be something that they don't have in the rulebook, because who would ever think of doing that? Such as, I don't know, you're playing a game of Battlestar and someone says, I'm a Cylon, can I attack our own, what are the ships called again?
Vipers.
Vipers.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what?
I wonder if he's up to something.
Or if, for example, in the DC deck building game, if everyone but one person blocks the Joker, does he discard it into his own graveyard?
Which I will still dispute to this day, but that's another topic altogether. But then also on the internet, you've got errata.
Yes,
that's the whole thing.
God, and that's brings us also to Descent.
Right. So errata is, if you don't know, it's a real term. It's not just for board games. Where basically they went back and they had to fix some things, amendments to the original rules based on people played the game and they found out some of the stuff doesn't quite work, or maybe it was unbalanced in one player's favor or another, so they had to go back and fix it.
And we mentioned Descent because there was one mission in which we played and we're like, there's no way we could have won this.
Yeah.
We look online the errata rules, and it's literally completely different.
Yeah, I was looking online, and they're like, "Oh, well, you just have to move this guy," and I was like, "Wait, what do you mean? You can't move him. You couldn't move him. You could move him. Probably still would have lost anyway, but it was."
No, I don't know. I think that
true.
because
it made it very.
Apparently, like after reading it, it's pretty much one side for the explorers. Which we sort of needed.
That would be okay. But yeah, that is definitely, it is a little problematic when you almost feel like with the game now, you have to go online before you even teach people to play, because you never know something could be wrong.
I feel like that was a really rare case of something that was so
true,
huge.
But there are
out of the ones we've played.
I mean, usually not game breaking.
Yeah.
But
I mean, like occasionally, like also Legendary had that one misprint, but like
right. And Robinson Crusoe, I know there was one where it was, anyway.
But I think one of the big things, though, is that internet is so available now, it's not nearly as worse.
That is a huge aid, to be able to just search for your problem.
Yeah, and it really helps also with player disputes.
Yes, which we have plenty of.
I mean, you have to. A rulebook can only cover so much. Can you imagine if they covered every single reaction thing? It'd be... well, they're already this thick, it'd be this.
No, I mean, it's tough. I mean, that's... something we don't really have experience with writing a rule book, but I know that's one of the hardest parts for designers, is just making sure that it's clear to people, because when you're playing a game for so long, you know the rules.
That's actually one of the funny things a lot of rule books include now is if a card disputes the rule, the card is right.
Right. Yeah, I know that's a big one.
It's sort of just let the cards flow.
They're like, we don't know, just do what it says. But let's get into briefly also teaching rules to people, because that's something that we have to do quite a lot. Because almost inevitably every week, or either someone new is there, or we're playing a game at least one person has not played before,
or they completely forgot.
I mean, I could probably recite till the day I die the rules for the Resistance, with how many times I had to go over that game for people.
Which is surprising, because there's not much to it.
But I think there is my philosophy, and I don't think this is an original thing, but I think the most important thing off the bat is give them the goal, what you're trying to do, how you win. I think that's number one, to get their vision straight. And then you go into, I think, your turn order and what you do, what you're allowed to do and how it works on your turn. And I think those are the key things that you need to know to play any game. And from there you can kind of, if specific questions come up, you can get into them later on.
Yeah, I mean, once again, the big issue is you have to understand each person learns differently. For example, that works great for me, what you said, because for me, the best thing to do is sort of just start seeing the game in motion.
at the end of the day, I think, I mean, definitely for me too, and probably I would say for most people, I would assume, you never quite have a handle on it until you actually play a couple rounds.
Yeah, but there's some people who literally just take a rule book and they can just read the entire thing through detail and then they're ready. I can't.
Right. No, yeah, I know every time I get a new game, I will always set the board up myself.
And play a game yourself, yeah.
And work through it.
I'm starting to try to do that more.
At least, sometimes if it's competitive, you can't really play a game by yourself. But at least I try to go through a couple turns to see how it works. But yeah, it can be a challenge.
Especially if they don't include a reference guide. Once again, like we said, those are nice.
Another thing is always helpful, if you can't do that, is to watch playthrough videos online. One thing that we're trying to do on our site, I don't know if you saw, we had a Catan playback episode. We're going to have another playback episode later this week after this airs. And
hopefully.
We will, I promise. And we're trying to accompany each one with a little how to play video. So please, if that helps you, let us know. Or not, let us know how we can improve them. Because that's definitely a good thing. It can be a real drag because it seems to me that for most of our games, like 40% of the playtime is setting it up and explaining it to people. That's definitely one of the big hurdles, I think, for people to play board games. It's just that there's a lot involved in getting ready for it.
What seems to be another thing is, I mean, in our group, I don't know about your groups, we sometimes have to explain the same game, which we have explained again.
Yeah.
And we don't know of a way yet. You can tell us. We'd love to hear. We'd really love. This is what we'd really love to hear about. If you have a way to help make sure that the people remember the rules for the next games and so on.
Some kind of a microchip you install in their brain.
I've tried that. That doesn't work.
Well, back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
Do people still have drawing boards? Is that a thing?
Back to the tabletop?
Chalkboard?
No, I think
Ivan does have a drawing board.
Okay, all right. As long as Ivan does. Okay,
we'll get one. Anyway, I think that about does it for rules talk.
Oh, actually, I think I have one more thing.
I was wrong.
Yeah, that's right. You're wrong. House rules.
Wow.
House rules, if you don't know the term, is when you add a couple rules to the game. It's usually to help if you feel like something would make it easier or if you want to make it harder. For example, in a video game, Pokemon, games already have the rules built in. But people have added their own house rules. I forget the name of the style.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But in saying that you can only capture one Pokemon per route. If they faint, you have to put it in the box. It's gone forever. To make it more difficult.
Sort of like Zelda, people have always, the no hearts run and stuff like that.
Things like that. In board games, they have their own thing. For example, if people are unsure about a rule, like the one we actually said is Battlestar, because that's not actually, I don't think they've officially yet announced that. People may have made house rules saying you can attack other Vipers.
Right.
The most interesting one I like is actually for Arkham Horror, because the creator came out with some house rules.
I think we already talked about this, actually.
And we probably have. So
on our co-op episode, I think. But that mishap.
What house rules have we actually used?
We usually don't go that crazy with.
No, they're usually not too big. But I think one I think of is Hanabi.
Oh well, that's.
Because at least as far as I know, it's not technically in the rules, but we decided you can't say I know I have this and this.
Right. You can't announce anything you know based on other people's cards.
Yes.
Only on your own, because then they can figure stuff out. But yeah, the rules of that game do say, they kind of say you're free to as much as you want or not, because it's co-op, so you can kind of.
I mean, we try to put that rule because it makes it more interesting.
Right. Otherwise, it's a little too easy.
And it's unlike a lot of the other co-op games, it's not 4 hours.
Right.
So
I know one of my house rules also is in the DC deck building game, if you're playing with the Joker card.
No, that's not, because it's my game.
That's my house rule. Well, if we play it in my house, that's my house rule. Again, that's another topic. We won't get into the nitty-gritty on that one. But that can definitely be. We usually do not really have any. I can't really think of any major stuff like that. We pretty much go by the rules.
But I mean, it's definitely something that's fair. I think it's fair to add.
Yeah, it can be fun to change it up a little bit.
Especially if you have someone who really doesn't like a game or just can't get their hands around
variable rules.
Or if you keep losing over and over and over.
Right. But if you go on, like on Board Game Geek, people have tons of great ideas for variants for games. That sometimes it's even more different from a house rule. It's like an entirely separate style of play.
Right, no, especially for like some games. I think Marvel, they actually even like games like that, they'll add new cards.
Right.
So you can use those.
Yeah, they have
which
some
is really cool.
Really cool. Really cool.
Really cool. All right, now that I think sums up.
I don't want to say anything. All right.
Next, we'll be talking about the rules that are in the Congress and why they won't go through.
Absolutely. Yep. That's it. From now on, that's our show. If you want to let us know you think the best way to teach rules, or some rule books that you really like or really dislike,
or some house rules that you really like to use,
anything that rules, leave us a comment on YouTube or send us an email to our address at rollforcrit@gmail.com. Or you can tweet us. Our tweetsters
are once again at Dorikiryu,
at Quence, at Ivan Arhan, and of course our at rollforcrit, which is our main Twitter account. Please, if you want to do us a favor, like this video on YouTube, like us on Facebook, subscribe on iTunes, Twitter, etc., etc., etc. Spread the word, my friends. Spread the word.
Spread the rules.
That's going to do it. I'm Jonathan Estes.
I'm Will Keeler, and this is the Roll for Crit podcast.